is that Islam has found its way into liberation theology for the last several centuries, going all the way back to Edward Blyden in Africa, to the Garveyites here in the United States, to Malcolm X, or whatever it may be. Islam was associated with being a slave-breaking religion. So then how do you then reckon with what appears to be a contradiction? That's the first thing. Then the second thing is, now you have images that come out of Libya, you have images that come out of ISIS, putting Yazidis in chains, Boko Haram, which I know that a lot of people would like to think that Boko Haram targets non-Muslims, but it actually targets primarily Muslims as well as non-Muslims, as does ISIS primarily target Muslims and non-Muslims. You say there is a contradiction. So who's really representing Islam? Who's telling the truth about Islam? Is there really a standardized position on Islam? So first fact, people can find inspiration from conventional Islamic sources against slavery. People can find inspiration from conventional Islamic sources against slavery more so than any other religious text. There is enough in there, an explicit anti-racism tradition, enough about how to deal with those conditions. If we focus on exploitation and inequality as opposed to the term itself, there is enough in there to fight against slavery. But then someone says, well, what about Muslim countries? Mauritania was of the last countries to abolish slavery. Saudi Arabia was of the last countries to abolish slavery. So that must mean Muslims are behind, right? Well, Tunisia abolished slavery in 1846, 19 years before the 13th Amendment was ratified here in the United States. So is Tunisia more Islamic or is Mauritania more Islamic? Or do they both not really represent our tradition in a wholesome sense, period? And is it unfair to associate the practice of Islam with some of these countries and to make that the distinction? The next question, so are you a slavery apologist? There's a difference between saying focus on the conditions, not the term, which has proved functionally useless, to downplay abuse and aggression in the past, and saying focus on the condition to recognize the abuse and the aggression in the present. I'm going to say that again. There's a difference between saying you can't use the term slavery because it doesn't make sense, or the term has become functionally useless, to downplay the past and to downplay abuse and aggression in the past, no matter who did it, and saying the term is functionally useless to highlight what is truly slavery in the present context. To say that there is actually more exploitation, human exploitation and abuse and inequity today than there ever has been in the history of the world. It's all, if you think about trafficking, human trafficking, I hate to break it to you, Texas, we always lead in horrible things, all right? So almost a third of human trafficking in the United States takes place here in Texas. Almost a third of it. So we have an extraordinary amount of slavery here in Texas.